Stealth is a vital component of countless action-adventure games, from the gargoyles of Batman Arkham to the cardboard box of Metal Gear Solid. But there's one series in particular that really innovated how stealth could be designed, and created an entirely unique system to build on over its 12 games. Assassin's Creed's innovation and subsequent focus on social stealth was always a massively important part of the identity of the franchise, but although it's present in almost all of the games, it hasn't always been exactly perfect. So today, we'll look at each of the games to see how they differ in their stealth systems, and most importantly, we'll try and figure out which is the best. Since the game was released 3 years ago, it's been panned time and time again for not being true to the series' identity, and the complete lack of a usable stealth system is just icing on that cake. Of course, Odyssey carried over the removal of social stealth entirely from Origins, but on top of that, it cut out nearly all the variety that was at least present in Origins thanks to its tools. Gone are any ranged items, smoke bombs, sleep darts, replaced instead with the myriad of demigod superpowers Cassandra has, leading to an experience that feels very similar whether you're 10 hours in or 100 hours. On top of that, Odyssey actively disincentivizes you to use stealth, because after all, you are the epic eagle-bearing Mystios, right? Rarely can you find a guard on your path that's low enough level to one-hit assassinate, and even then, the chances of finding, say, an entire garrison of those guards is about 1,000 to 1. Throughout the entire game, you're encouraged to hack and slash at every guard you meet, and it's usually the more efficient and less infuriating option. Sure, it got rid of the hidden blade too, but that's a superficial problem. The real issue with Odyssey's stealth system is basically, it doesn't even have one. How could I possibly have Valhalla behind Origins? After all, Valhalla reintroduced social stealth, it brought back the hidden blade, it brought back hoots and one-hit assassinations. Well, yes, on a surface level, Valhalla did bring back those things. But just because the AC elements are there, they're by no means executed even competently. Because Valhalla's core as a game is simply not built for stealth. It's built to be an epic Viking raider, raiding and chopping through hundreds of guards at a time with your axe. The return of social stealth was reduced and simplified down to completely contextual moments of blending, wherein you have to walk as slowly as the engine allows to avoid the wrath of guards, occasionally slipping in and out of groups of monks who have the NPC AI of the turtles from Crash Bandicoot. And if you dare for a moment do a slight jog, the detection time of the enemy AI is so brutally short that you have no time to react. And worst of all, when you do get detected, there's no mechanic that allows you to run away and hide. No, as soon as Eivor gets detected, she rips off her hood, pulls out her axes and starts hacking away, regardless of the intentions of the player. Take a monastery for example, the location set up in AC1-Valhalla to raid. Well, in Odyssey and more so in Origins, you at least had the option to take on these garrison-like locations using stealth. But in Valhalla, the option isn't even there. If you want to even try to create the fantasy of being a stealthy assassin, you have to crash your boat about 100 meters away from the monastery, sneak up behind it, take out each guard individually, praying to the lords above that you don't get detected, before finally calling your longship so that you can actually get the loot. This destroys any intrinsic motivation of the player to play stealthily, as at the drop of a hat, their attempt at playing the game as if they were an assassin can be completely broken, and they get immediately reminded that Valhalla is simply a Viking game with a hidden blade plastered on. The system also completely lacks any semblance of risk versus reward, a key component to make any stealth system worth the player's time. It is always, I repeat, always more efficient to run straight into an enemy camp waving both your axes, and unless you're able to play it absolutely flawlessly, that'll probably be the end result of the stealth encounters you do attempt. The marketing of Valhalla being a return to social stealth is in retrospect an absolute joke, and with the hype built up around the comeback of those classic systems, the complete disappointment that Valhalla stealth is cuts even deeper. So, unsurprisingly, it's the 3 New Age Assassin's Creeds that come out last on this list, and considering the intended direction of the series over the last 5 years, that's not exactly surprising. What's a bit more surprising though is that Origins comes out on top of this RPG trilogy when it comes to stealth, which is something I never thought I'd say 3 years ago. Due to Origins being a more transitional game between classic action-adventure AC and a more combat-centric RPG style, it still retains far more of the identity of the series in comparison to Odyssey and Valhalla. Sure, social stealth was removed and the hidden blade was downgraded, but honestly these changes far from completely ruin the experience. Upgrading your hidden blade is annoying, but it's far more likely to get a one-hit assassination than any kill in Odyssey. The lack of crowds does take away from the Assassin's Creed side of things, but a significant number of the levels are designed in a way to make environmental stealth not only usable but genuinely fun and engaging, and that's just boosted by the various additions that can be found in the skill tree. Sleep darts, smoke bombs and poison all provide something that Valhalla and Odyssey lack: variety, the ability to get creative with stealth, to figure out different techniques to deal with certain situations. Origin stealth is by no means great, but it at least makes stealth somewhat enjoyable, which is far more than I can say for the other two RPG entries. Assassin's Creed 3's stealth is honestly kind of strange to me. Whilst it's certainly usable and far more true to what Assassin's Creed is, it's rarely utilised within the game. Since the story of Connor is of course built around the Revolutionary War, and so many of his missions are built on top of that, you find that most of the game is more similar to Valhalla in the way that it encourages you to simply run into an area and fight every guard in sight. This was probably due to Ubisoft wanting to show off the new and massively unimproved combat system that they attempted to copy from the Batman Arkham games, and whilst chopping through soldiers with the tomahawk will always be a blast, it'd still be nice if more of the missions were built around the stealth system, which at its core is pretty good. Most of the core gameplay is similar to the original 4 games, but the additions of the bow, the rope dart and traps really add something to what on the surface is fairly simple, once again tapping into the player's intrinsic motivation. The biggest downside with AC3 though is its AI, who are unpredictable and punishing to a level that makes stealth infuriating, almost goading the player into just fighting the guards in every single encounter, similarly to Valhalla. It'd be very tough for me to call AC3 stealth bad, it's far from it, but when it's only really encouraged and smooth when you're hunting rabbits in the frontier, it simply can't be put in the upper echelon of this series' stealth. So the top half of this list took quite a while to organise. Let me just preface this by saying that all the stealth systems from here on out I genuinely think are great, but one has to fall a little bit, and in this case it's Assassin's Creed. Now, I absolutely adore AC1's stealth system. I believe it was the perfect foundation for what came later in the series, with its incorporation of social stealth, hiding, and an actual incentive to run away. There is no better feeling than getting a perfect assassination in AC1 and then running a clean parkour route before hiding in a roof garden. And the fantastic mission design of each assassination allows for that feeling throughout the whole game. The assassination mission design of AC1 was ahead of its time in many ways, and so too was the detection system, which was built based on true social awareness. The constant caution of the guards of the Holy Land, which only gets heightened as the game goes on, means you have to truly become a blade in the crowd. You have to ensure your actions are socially acceptable, and that's all predicated on a high/low profile system that has so much beauty in its simplicity. That all being said, of course AC1 was the first game in the series, and with that it's not quite as fleshed out or polished as the future games. There is honestly not much to criticize, it's simply a functional, immersive, engaging system, and the only reason it comes so low in this list is because it's compared to the future games that improved upon it. Now, I was debating whether to put AC2 higher than its predecessor on this list for a while, because despite its clear upgrades, I do feel that this now iconic sequel simplified some of the stealth mechanics. First and foremost, the detection system is watered down slightly, with detection meters and elongated warnings replacing the intense fear of soldiers turning on you in the blink of an eye. On top of that, despite the mission design as a game being much better in AC2, I do feel many of the assassination missions lost their openness, and became far more rigid and linear. While I think that's to the favour of AC2 as a game, it does take away from the problem solving aspect of AC1 that created that assassin fantasy so perfectly. That all being said, the addition of double hidden blades, poisons, smoke bombs and the hidden gun, as well as a wider blending mechanic and the ability to hire various factions to distract guards, adds so many options to the stealth system that it just edges out AC1 to crack the 6th spot on this list. Assassin's Creed Black Flag and Assassin's Creed Rogue have in essence the exact same gameplay, and that goes for the stealth too. It's a system far more focused on environmental stealth thanks to the game's settings, and with that we see a heavier emphasis on tools and weapons, whether it's the sleep darts, berserk darts, rope darts, smoke bombs, or Shay's multi-use rifle. Thanks to these tools, along with the massively simplified detection system, it's truly possible in these games to bend guards to your will and create whatever stealth outcome you want. Whistling helps with this, on top of the fact that the AI are blind to anything that happens in Stalking Zone. However, although this somewhat brain-dead AI can be fun to mess around with, it definitely has its downsides. Essentially, Black Flag and Rogue stealth systems are far too easy. Rarely are you ever going to be detected thanks to the snail-paced detection time and the guards that were born yesterday. This of course is largely thanks to the fact that Black Flag was ported to the Wii U on release, and so some facets of its tech had to be dumbed down to function properly on that disaster of a console. That complete lack of difficulty, along with the lack of social stealth possibilities, bring down what is at its core a fairly varied, engaging system that you can get a lot of fun out of but rarely get any kind of challenge from. Assassin's Creed Revelations, despite being the final culmination of a story, sometimes feels like a middle child in the Ezio trilogy, at least in its gameplay. It without a doubt carries over all the great things from its predecessors, but unlike Brotherhood, the things it actually adds fall somewhat flat on their face. The variety of bombs, for example, seemed like a natural progression of the smoke bombs we saw in 2 and Brotherhood, but the fleshed out explosive mechanic becomes somewhat of an afterthought when you've got poison darts and the crossbow, which work in stealth situations 1,000 times better. On top of that, the level design for Revelations is far less attuned to stealth compared to the likes of Brotherhood, as a decent majority of its missions are either tombs focused on parkour or more climactic missions with a fair bit of fighting involved. When you do stumble across a pure stealth mission though, it's usually on par with the design of Brotherhood's missions, but in Revelations they're not only few and far between, but also don't really feel like they're improved upon compared to Brotherhood, which is what you would expect from a sequel. On a fundamental gameplay level, the system is still great, however the game simply doesn't utilise the system enough for me to justify it breaking the top 3. Now this is probably going to piss some people off, but honestly, if I could say one nice thing about my least favourite game in this series, it'd be that Syndicate's stealth is legitimately very good, and it's mostly thanks to its mission design. AC Syndicate stealth, of course, shares a lot of mechanics with Unity, the crouching, the cover system, but most importantly, it carried over the fantastic black box missions, which although I think are done slightly worse in their second iteration, are still fantastic nonetheless. Taking inspiration from a mix of Assassin's Creed 1 and the Hitman series, the black box missions give the player a truly open area with countless options to assassinate their target, with the help of distraction opportunities, entrance opportunities, and unique kills. And although I feel that unique kill system is slightly too rigid, there is still the option to ignore it entirely, and play each level how you want, mapping out the area to find the best entry and exit points to get to your target. On top of that, the item selection is fairly decent, with throwing knives, smoke bombs, stun bombs, on top of berserk darts that you can not only hit individual enemies with, but also spread to a group of enemies by making a cloud of fumes by shooting the darts out of fire. Being able to kidnap certain targets to get you into areas also added an extra dimension to social stealth, which of course also comes in the form of crowd blending as it should. Of course, it still has the over-the-top parodical nature that all of Syndicate has at times, with Evie at one point gaining an ability to literally become invisible. But on a whole, it's a more than functional system with punishing yet rewarding AI, open and varied mission design, and relatively immersive gameplay. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is my second favourite game of all time, so unsurprisingly it comes out pretty high on this list. The fact of the matter is, everything Brotherhood does, it does absolutely fantastically, and that's no different when it comes to stealth. It took everything AC1 and 2 had created and built a fucking skyscraper on top. The addition of the crossbow, of the Brotherhood system, of multi-hit throwing knives, of poison darts, all added so much more depth to what came before. But where Brotherhood really shines, similarly to Syndicate and number 1 on this list, is in its masterful mission design. Breaking into the Castello, into the banker's party, into the Baron de Valois' fort, tailing Micheletto before striking him down in the middle of the Colosseum, every single one of the Leonardo missions, breaking into Lucrezia Borgia's villa. I could go on and on about the countless missions that were handcrafted to not only encourage stealth, but make it the most rewarding option from both an external and internal motivation standpoint. With your recruits primed to strike at a moment's notice, or your crossbow at the ready, no other game is able to nail the fantasy and feeling of being an assassin, of being a true blade in the crowd. Well, no other game except one. People are gonna hate me for this. Assassin's Creed Unity was the last game made by the original Ubisoft Montreal team, and it shows. The lengths this team went to recapture the essence of the original 4 games and truly evolve what they set up is more than honourable, and although the game faltered in a lot of places, stealth simply wasn't one of them. This game felt like a true evolution of the original intention of social stealth. The massive crowds acted as the perfect hiding spot for an assassin, drifting in and out of the streets of revolutionary Paris, silently eliminating enemies before falling back into the side streets and alleyways. The open world of Unity was perfectly crafted to make stealth the first choice for any player, along with the relative difficulty of the combat. But on top of the open world, Unity of course introduced black box missions, which lay the foundation for what could have been the future of the series. Even more than Syndicate, Unity's stealth system truly gave the player the control to tackle each stealth mission whichever way they pleased. If you wanted, you could enter through the sewers, climb to your target, or run straight in guns blazing. You could attempt missions purely purely with your ranged weapons, with your Phantom and Berserk blades, or you could get in closer using a mixture of cherry, stun and smoke bombs to daze your enemies and ensure you go unseen. You could use one of seemingly hundreds of entry points, vantage points and assassination opportunities, and you could do this all on not only almost every single story mission, but also in the myriad of side content, the multiplayer heist, the Paris stories and the Dead Kings DLC. Yes, I won't deny that like all of Unity, the functionality of the system occasionally goes awry, but for the most part you can truly embrace the feeling of being a blade in the crowd for the first time since the Ezio trilogy. And I would argue that because of how well it captures that specific fantasy, Assassin's Creed Unity has the best stealth in all of Assassin's Creed.